Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin from CollectingJapanesePrints.com. This is Wednesday, so it's Woodblock Wednesday. My apologies for those of you joining me live. I had some workmen here earlier today, and the repairs that were being done to my apartment, they were really loud, and it wouldn't allow me to do this video live. That was about an hour ago or so. But normally I go live at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, Chicago time. And today I'd like to speak to you about something that I get asked about pretty frequently. Being a collector, also a dealer in Japanese prints, people often ask me, what do I do to store and preserve my own prints? And I typically do not frame my collection or prints that I sell online. I store them in archival folders and in archival boxes. And today I wanted to show you some examples of what I do to store my artwork. And I want to encourage all of you who collect Japanese prints or who have fine art prints to store them correctly. You'd be surprised how quickly damage could occur to prints if they're stored in an inhospitable environment. So let's go to the table and we'll have a look at some examples. So this is an example of an archival museum box. It's one that you could find online from several manufacturers, and basically it's made out of paper, but it's all archival, so there are no chemicals that are released from this paper, so it's suitable for long-term storage of prints. And in a box like this, I typically have folders. You could use any kind of paper that's archival, and a box like this can hold a couple hundred paper folders, assuming you only put one print in each folder. But in this case, this folder contains several prints, and I'll show you. So in this folder, I have smaller folders that are, this is basically Japanese paper. It's Japanese handmade paper called hosho. And you could get this online. Soon enough, I'll be offering boxes and as well as paper for collectors on my website. But for now, I'll just kind of show you what you could find pretty much anywhere online. Though archival materials are pricey, so you'll have to invest wisely. But at the same time, artwork, it's priceless to store artwork in the correct environment. So let me see. So what we have here is, this is an Ito Shinsui landscape. It's a very rare pre-earthquake design from his 8 Views of Omi. And so I thought I'd show his prints from this series as an example of how you would store them. So, Ito Shinsui, as everyone knows, is a Shinhanga artist working with Watanabe in the earlier part of the 20th century. And Watanabe basically produced about 98% of Shinsui's output. And within Shinsui's body of work, the vast majority were actually bijinga, or portraits of beautiful women. But a small subset of Shinsui's body of work were landscapes. And this print, and I'll show the rest of them, is a rare example from the pre-earthquake period, or this is a print that was done in the early 1920s and before the earthquake, and it shows basically depictions of Japanese landscapes. And in this conversation. What's important is that this particular print is housed in its own folder. It's not actually stored with other prints on top of each other. And I've seen that happen incorrectly at collectors' homes, where they have a series of prints by a particular artist, and they just sort of stack up the prints right on top of each other. And that's actually not the way to store artwork. And basically, all artwork, or all Japanese prints in particular, are made of handmade Japanese paper. It's an organic material, but being organic, there's a natural acidity to the paper. And so when you store prints on top of each other, the natural acidities in the paper leach from one sheet to the next. And you could get browning, staining. Of course, the pigments themselves can transfer over onto the other sheet through oxidation, other chemical processes that are involved when you store a print in an environment that sort of creates chemical reactions. But anyway, so you'll see that all of these prints are stored individually. And I'm going to try to do this all with one hand, laying them out on my table. But you'll see each single print is in its own folder. This series, as I mentioned, there's 8. So there's a few more to come. When I have them all out, I will basically, zoom in so you could see the prints as I normally do in a normal, presentation. But in this sort of talk, I want to really also, besides discussing the artwork, I want to focus on the storage and how these prints and all fine art prints will benefit from years of storage in the proper materials. And though I don't frame my own artwork, obviously most people do, and which is fine. You just need to make sure that they're framed in a manner that allows the print to be housed in a archival environment. So everything has to be acid-free. I would recommend museum glass on the frame. And I also recommend writing the date when the frame print has been framed, because I would recommend about every 10 years you would swap out the museum glass. And people suggest that that's a good sort of benchmark, because the technology for the framing or the glass that framers use, about every 10 years there's advances, and so that ensures you have the latest sort of technology in preservation of your artwork. So having said all that about framing, I'm going to zoom in on these prints so you could see some really wonderful Ito Shinsui landscapes from the early 1920s. And it is, as is typical of pre-earthquake Watanabe published prints, these colors are very richly applied onto the paper. I mean, in this particular print, you could see this wonderful bokashi in the mountain range, and bokashi meaning a gradation of color from light to dark, and you see this light bluish gray that sort of changes into this dark bluish gray. It's beautifully done in this particular print. And just sort of zooming along here, there's another one where this beautiful bokashi creates a wonderful atmospheric quality of a clear night sky with the moon hanging overhead, and the wood grain also creates a really wonderful sort of atmospheric quality in the design. This is one of the more popular designs, more well known. There's this one, and then this night scene. And because this set was published by Watanabe, it was issued at the same time. They were stamped on the reverse. And this particular set is a match number set, which means that it was never separated. It was issued together. These are limited in edition, and so they were all kept together over the years, which is quite hard to find now. You usually see these sold individually because they were broken up years and years ago. And it's really important to sort of keep these together if you actually have a match number set. The value of the entire set actually is greater than if you were to put together these prints, especially if they're in perfect condition like these. But again, getting back to the conversation at hand and the sort of the real purpose of today's talk is preserving your artwork. And if you're going to keep prints, all kinds of art prints, not just Japanese prints, but all kinds of artwork on paper, Japanese prints need a hospitable environment. And so what this collection shows, they're all prints that belong together. As I said, it's a match number set, but they're housed individually, in each print is housed in its own paper folder. Each of these folders are archival, and so we don't have to worry about acidity from either the print or the paper interacting and creating a chemical reaction that would make the prints brown and even brittle over time. So in this way, housing them in their own individual folders, you're going to ensure that the paper stays basically the way that the paper looked like when the prints were first produced. The paper is very flexible, and you'll see the color is unified. There's no brown or spots. The paper shouldn't be white, but it shouldn't be yellow or brown. And so all of these prints have been housed in the right environment to keep them looking great. And as I mentioned, they all go into their folders. And here, I'm trying to do this with one hand. And I recommend, if you have a set like that, putting them in a larger folder. And of course, in a museum box. And as I mentioned, museum boxes like this can hold hundreds of prints. It depends how many and how thick the folders you use. But buying one, if you have a collection of 100 or 150 Oban sized prints, that would be ideal. And I mean, the boxes themselves are actually very inexpensive when you really consider how important your artwork is and how expensive restoration can be. So this particular box, I think cost me about $40 to $50. And as I said, it's completely archival, and so we're ensuring the preservation of this artwork for generations to come. And this is actually precisely how the museums worldwide house their prints in their collections. So this is an important topic, and one, as I mentioned, I think I get asked this at least once a week about storing artwork properly, and in the future, I'll have other conversations about how one might frame prints and then or store frame prints. And I mean, there's quite a bit of information that we could share about the conservation and preservation of prints. But what I would like for all of you to take home today is that prints by nature are acidic because the paper is organic. And if they're not stored in a hospitable environment, meaning an environment that is pH neutral, so there are papers that you can buy at the art supply store that are pH neutral, and I'd recommend getting those, putting the prints themselves in these folders, and then in a box that's also pH neutral. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at the comments below this video. And of course, I welcome your private messages about other questions or concerns. Today's video really was focused on based on a question, actually. It was inspired by a question from one of my viewers. So I really appreciate the questions. I appreciate you tuning in and watching these videos. Every Wednesday at 1 p.m., we discuss all kinds of topics relating to Japanese prints. And of course, if you haven't had a chance, please visit my website. It's collectingjapaneseprints.com. We currently have a great exhibition of night scenes. We also have a bookstore, links to some interesting events all around the world with museums, also links to just interesting topics. And of course, if you see something that we should post on our website, send me an email. I'd be happy to include it. So thanks again for joining me today. I will see you next week when we'll discuss something else relating to Japanese prints and paintings. Thank you.